Hello ladies and gentlemen and video game lovers of all kind, and welcome to another Let's Discuss video. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video we are going to be looking at the controversy of The Last of Us Part 2 and the real issues with it. So for the video, we are going to be diving into the brutal and unforgiving world of The Last of Us. It took 7 whole years for this sequel to finally release. And while it's been praised by critics, the fans and gamers alike haven't necessarily seen it the same way. So, why is that? Naughty Dog seemed to be known as a developer that could do no wrong, but they're taking an awful lot of heat for this one. So, throughout this video, we will be discussing the controversy surrounding The Last of Us Part 2 and what the real issues are with it. So without further ado, let's hop right into things. And now seems like a good time to issue a major spoiler warning. Yes, that is right, if you have not completed The Last of Us Part 2 yet, or if you have not seen any of the leaks, there are going to be major spoilers in this video. I would also like to issue a mature content warning. So for my underage viewers out there, or those of you who are a bit squeamish, almost all of the gameplay released for this game is very graphic in nature, so you have been warned. First, I want to recognize that those who are bashing the game for claiming that it is social justice warrior propaganda or trying to force its homosexual agenda on us and all this sort of other stuff are very much the vocal minority. Albeit they are very vocal, I've seen and read some really nasty stuff and it's not pretty. My initial reaction was disgust and I hadn't read any further into the reviews, but I now realize that this is only a small portion of the community spewing this nonsense and they are giving a very bad name to people who have genuine issues with the game. Although I'm still disgusted with their words and actions, I do realize that they are in fact the minority. So, with that being said, the main controversy of the game stems from the leaks that popped up just before the game's release. Now, there's different theories floating around everywhere as to how this happened, but the main one is that a disgruntled ex-Naughty Dog employee was responsible for the leaks. I didn't want to see these and have the game ruined for myself, so I didn't go looking for them, and luckily for me, I actually managed to play through the game without any spoilers. The leaks led to a lot of pissed off fans, like a lot. And many of them wrote angry reviews as soon as the user score option popped up without even playing the game. I know this is true because the game had thousands of reviews on the day before or the same day it dropped, and there's no way it is even possible for someone to get all the way through a 20 to 40 hour game and then write an angry review in that amount of time. But regardless, back to the leaks. I tried looking for them after beating the game so I could make this video, and they were actually a little tough to find. But it appears that the main things people were pissed off about from the leaks were A, you only play roughly the first half of the game as Ellie, and the second half you play as a new character named Abby, and B, Abby kills Joel very early into the game. So yeah. Yikes. There were other story beats leaked as well, but they didn't stir up such a commotion. These two were the big main things. We were led to believe that this was Ellie's game and Ellie's story, and to find out we only played half the game as her came as a bit of a shock. But on top of that, finding out that the main protagonist from the first game is brutally beaten and murdered a mere 2 hours into the game was quite upsetting to most. Here's the thing though. So many people are screaming at Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann for their bad writing and poor storytelling, and I'm here to tell you that's very much not the case. Just because a story has things in it you disagree with doesn't mean it's bad storytelling. The story here is so well written, so emotional and so deep that there's no way anyone could convince me these folks don't know how to write a gripping and unforgettable story, regardless of your thoughts on it and the way it was told. When a story has things you disagree with, you have a choice to make, and there's 2 options. 1, you can disagree with it, and that's that. You can hate it, be mad at it, scream about it, but at the end of the day, you just have to accept it whether you like it or not, because what's done is done. The game has been released, the movie is out, whatever the situation is, it's done. Or, option 2, is that you can look at it from a different perspective. I'll give you a brief and personal example of this. I tweeted the day that this came out, that The Last of Us Part 2 was the Last Jedi of video games. So it seems fitting to talk about The Last Jedi here. When the movie first came out, it had an eerily similar response, and for similar enough reasons. People were pissed about Luke Skywalker's portrayal. When I first left the theater, I didn't love the movie, and I didn't hate it, but I know for sure that I disagreed with some of its decisions. But after multiple rewatches and deciding to open up my mind to its ideas and decisions a bit more, I slowly began to fall in love with it. The thing is that people expected the same happy-go-lucky Luke that they got in the original trilogy, but it's been 30 years since we last saw that Luke. Since then, he has been through some shit. The most controversial moment being the point where Luke almost kills Ben Solo in his sleep. He had a brief moment where he saw a potential monster. A monster that would rule over the galaxy with an iron fist just like Luke's father did. The Empire had control over the galaxy for decades and caused so much pain and suffering, and Luke thought he could avoid that and spare everyone in the galaxy with this one act. But he stops, ashamed of himself and realizing that it is not the way. But of course, Ben wakes up at the exact moment that Luke questions this decision and believes that Luke is trying to kill him. He lashes out and goes on to become Kylo Ren. Luke created the very thing he sought to destroy, bringing a new reign of terror over the galaxy. Ashamed, embarrassed, and unable to live up to the legendary Luke Skywalker name, Luke exiles himself and waits to die. This all makes perfect sense to me, and whether you agree with it or not, it's brilliant storytelling. Not to mention, it's always overlooked that Luke returns to his former self by the end of the flick. So, switch back to the decision to kill Joel, and so early on. Although my initial reaction was shock, and quite honestly, anger as well. As the game progressed, I realized that, like I said in the intro, this world is brutal and unforgiving. It tries for the most part to be realistic, aside from the obvious video game stuff because, it is still a video game. And in the real world, and even more so in this world, not everyone gets a fairy tale ending, and certainly not everyone gets a hero's death. Joel crossed so many people and took so many lives, subsequently ruining so many others in the process just over the course of the first game. And we know when we hit that time jump in the first game of 20 years later, Joel is not a good guy. And he doesn't have a good guy reputation. I feel that this decision was actually necessary to properly be invested in Ellie's tale of revenge. And if you've gotten a good chunk into the game, Ellie's tale of revenge is a repercussion of Abby's tale of revenge. This deals right into the main themes of this story, being hatred, revenge, and the vicious never-ending cycle of violence when you carry these things with you. So, although the decision initially angered me, and it's understandable if it angered you, it's not bad storytelling. Nor is it a bad story. It is in fact very much the opposite. You may disagree with the decisions, but the storytelling here is some of the best in gaming. Now for the real issues, some of which do involve the story and some of which involve the gameplay itself. So the gameplay one is the easiest to start with since it's far more subjective and a lot less of a heavy subject. And that's the fact that since this game is so much longer than the first, I found myself so damn tired of the gameplay loop that by the last quarter of the game, I felt like taking on a group of enemies was such a slog. I was bored out of my mind by the end of it, and just frustrated because it's the same thing every time. Crouch or prone in the grass, sneak around and stealth kill, or hold up in a corner or whatever and go guns blazing as enemies stupidly charge at you. I felt this became so repetitious that it pulled me out of the experience, and I just wanted to get past it as fast as possible so I could get back to the exploring and story stuff, as I found that so much more interesting. It's not that the gameplay is bad. The gameplay is so smooth that even on a base, original PS4, it runs smooth as butter. I like the additions of new enemies and new ways to play. I love the brutality of it, the different environments, and the combat overall, but the game lasts so much longer than it should, so it got on my nerves after a while. On a side note though too, is that the graphics here are some of the best I've ever seen. Even PC players have expressed how impressed they are. Whoa there, hold your horses for just a quick second. If you're enjoying the video, don't get stuck in the 88.2% who are currently watching and not subscribed to my channel. Be sure to hit that subscribe button now so you can get more content just like this. And while you're at it, don't forget to ring that little bell icon, that way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And now, back to the video. Now, as for the story beats that I think are the real biggest issues are this. Abby section, which yes, was leaked, and the ending, which I believe was not satisfactory at all really. So firstly, the Abby section, which I felt was so unbearably unnecessary. I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to show both sides of the story. They were trying to make you sympathetic towards her, and again trying to emphasize that vicious cycle and how it goes both ways. I understand all that. But what it ends up doing is feeling like a 6-hour detour in order to pad the runtime in a failed attempt to make you feel something for a character you hate. She is a bad person, and although Ellie isn't the greatest person either, she's much better than Abby. For me, they honestly could have shown that brief sequence with her father, and then the events at the end of the first game from her perspective, and then cut back to the encounter with Ellie. You know, the real meat of the game and stuff that everyone wants to see. Instead, we get this long, drawn-out sequence where she looks after two young cultists fleeing from their cult and are now being hunted by them. Again, they're trying to show she's not a bad person, while also trying to replicate that Joel and Ellie-styled relationship between her and Lev. But again, it falls flat. The whole portion of the game feels like it takes forever and pulls you right out of the main story. And even though it honestly does have some very cool and quite epic moments, especially when you're fighting through Haven as it's on fire, you honestly just don't care. And when it comes back to that encounter with Ellie and your task with taking her out, you just don't want to. You have to spam the square button and try to strangle her to death when you don't want to at all. Ellie is not the villain. She is an Abby story, but Abby is a piece of shit. Which is further proven when Ellie tells Abby to stop from killing Dina, that Dina is pregnant, and Abby says good before almost cutting her throat until Lev stops her. When Ellie killed a pregnant woman in self-defense, she immediately has a mental breakdown and has a full-blown panic attack. She has to practically be dragged away by Jesse and Tommy, and what we get from Abby is good. If Lev wasn't there, she would have found pleasure in cutting a pregnant woman's throat. Who's the villain again? Now lastly is the ending, which has to be one of the most morbid and depressing endings I have ever seen to anything. Ellie lets Abby and Lev go, and when she returns home, Dina and JJ are gone, taking everything with them. I get why Ellie didn't kill Abby. Going back to the themes of the game, she sees that Abby cares for Lev like Joel cared for her, and that if she kills Abby, Lev will just come for her, continuing the cycle. I understand it, but damn did I want Abby dead. I wanted to feel the satisfaction of getting that revenge. It was the driving force for me through some of the slower parts of the game, and the main thing that kept me from completely losing it when Joel died. I thought to myself, well, at least I know I'll get my revenge on all of these bastards by the end of it. But whatever, it's fine, because Ellie will return home and live out the rest of her days until a ripe old age where she can drift away one night in her sleep with her family and their farmhouse. But nope. That's all gone too. Returning to those themes, I get it. It wants to show just how ugly grudges, revenge, and hatred can get. They can literally ruin your entire life, and for Ellie, it did. She allowed it to take her over, and in turn took away everything she ever loved. Joel died because of revenge, and she lost her family in Second Chance at Life because of revenge. But at the end of the day, it's a game, and a fairly long one, and no gamer wants to put in all that time to feel like they've been cheated of a true and satisfying ending. I know what I said earlier, about not everyone gets a hero's death or a fairy tale ending, and this ending is fairly grounded in reality, but I felt so cheated of a real ending. I played through all of that, gave it my all as a gamer and lover of the first game, only to be cheated twice. I don't get my satisfaction of revenge, and I don't get the satisfaction of Ellie finally getting some happiness and a new shot at life. It's pretty damn depressing after all that you go through. At the end of the day, The Last of Us Part 2 is still a really solid game. Amazing graphics, such a detailed and vibrant world, a gripping, powerful, and emotionally driven story with some deep, dark, and meaningful themes, satisfying and smooth, albeit repetitive gameplay, but both a superb and flawed game overall. The story is so well told, but it makes some choices that I really do disagree with, even when fully understanding what they were going for, and it's a bit too long for its own good. The first game was about half as long, and that fits so perfectly for the story. It left me drained emotionally and genuinely pondering some of its questions and very bold choices. Is it worth playing? Absolutely. You need to form your own opinion on this. And despite my grievances, I can guarantee that this game is one I will be thinking about for a very long time. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with me. And feel free to be as honest as possible with your thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching. And that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.